Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of diaXpora. I'm your host Taylor, and today we're going to talk to Olivia Ferris. She's a senior data recruitment consultant at Talent Insights, and in this episode, she's going to share with us about how the market for data role is right now in Australia and how to break into data in general and as an international student or temporary resident in Australia. So without further ado, let's get to the conversation.
All right. So Olivia, welcome to diaXpora. This is a channel that we want to focus on helping young professionals who have an immigrant background, who have moved to Australia to build a meaningful career and life here. And we're here in Australia. So I'm hoping that this conversation is going to bring a lot of insights for our audience about career building, especially in data. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up as a recruiter.
Of course. Thank you for having me, first of all. So I first fell into data recruitment back in 2018. So I just finished university where I studied an English degree at Loughborough in the UK. So nothing to do with data or tech. And I put my resume on a British job board called Indeed. And I got headhunted at the time about an opportunity that was based in Cheshire in England for a data recruitment company where they just told me a little bit about the role. I hadn't really heard of recruitment before. I didn't really know what it was, but it sounded like a really good mix of a lot of things that I enjoyed doing. So kind of marketing, sales, it was very kind of people person job, which I really enjoy. And I like the idea that it was, almost a business within a business, and you can kind of almost control and dictate what you do and how much you earn as well, depending on how hard you work. So went for it. I did a bit of traveling in Australia as soon as I finished university. Really loved it, and I thought one day I'm going to go back out there. But then I started in recruitment, just working the data contract market in London, which was really fast paced, quite cutthroat. It's a very saturated market. But it instilled in me some really good kind of fundamentals, and I just kind of totally immersed myself into data recruitment. So I spent 3 years at the agency, and then one of my clients called Railsbank, who are an open banking platform app, I'd helped to build out their data team, and they were about to embark on a huge growth phase, and they offered me an internal role that was a really good opportunity. At the time, I still had Australia part of the plan, but COVID was kind of hindering that, so I wasn't sure when that was going to come into fruition. But they said, come on board for as long as we can have you. Fully remote role would give me some really good internal experience to have on the resume, having only worked agency side.
Yeah.
So good exposure across different areas of the business rather than just working with data stakeholders as well. So I joined them for around 10 months. Before then, the borders lifted, and I was able to come over to Australia in 2022. Where I'd already lined up the opportunity with Talent Insights, who are a pure data recruitment company, about 6 months before. So I already had the job offer kind of lined up. And then came over, July 2022, and I've been here ever since.
That's it sounds like you have a lot of experience in hiring and in HR, not just in Australia, but also in the UK, where I think there are probably even more data roles and more movement in data roles. This is a controversial question, but do you still feel like data is the sexiest job of the 21st century?
I think so. But I kind of have to say that. But no, I have to say that. No, I definitely do. I think, there'll always be a demand and a need for, awesome data professionals. I think, companies have to be data driven to succeed. And I think if you can really nail that and get that done at the core, then that's the main difference between a lot of your organizations that are doing well. 100%. And those that don't. So don't get me wrong, I think there's been a bit of a lull, which is a widespread observation across a lot of markets, not just kind of tech, over the past 12 to 18 months, and also beyond that kind of globally, not just Australia, but say across the UK, Europe, the States, just because of the economy. There's been a lot of, budget constraints and tech redundancies as well. So I think that's made the past 12 to 18 months a little bit quieter than what we'd like and what we're used to seeing. However, over the past 2 months, we've noticed that start to pick up again. There's a lot more momentum there, and I think going into 2025, 100% will bounce back. There'll always be peaks and troughs, but I think the main point is there will always be a shortage of data professionals, and companies want to hire the best, and that will always, continue. So
So there's still hope for
there's still lots of
data
hope. Yeah, even with
professionals.
AI and all that, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But there's plenty of hope for sure.
So within data roles, there are obviously engineering focused roles, and there are more visualization, analytics, or maybe AI engineers now, and machine learning engineers. Where do you see a lot of growth now in the market where companies are really looking for skills in a certain area? Which one is it?
Yeah, good question. So over here, I followed quite a similar trajectory to what I did in the UK, where I noticed a rise in demand for your more modern kind of open source technology stack. So we're talking about technologies such as like Looker, which is a reporting tool, DBT, which is an ELT tool, Snowflake, data warehousing, Databricks, Airflow. So those kind of modern technologies comprises and leads to the coinage of this term called analytics engineer that I really focused in the UK. And then when I first got to Australia, it wasn't really a thing. It was still very much in its infancy back in 2022. However, fast forward to now, I'm having a lot of conversations with clients that are already on the more modern tech stack or wanting to migrate or running POCs, which is great and music to my ears because, it's an area that I love. And the kind of people that work with those technologies are really passionate. A lot of the companies that are on those technologies are your more sexier, kind of cool product tech companies as well. So I'm seeing an increase in demand for those kind of skills. So the whole analytics engineering. I'd also say data engineering, more broadly speaking, is still very much in demand. So solid data engineers with the data warehousing experience, good data modeling capabilities. I'm also noticing a lot of demand for data engineers across contract and permanent resource. And then I'd say outside of that, more broadly speaking, the combination of technical capabilities, but also strong commercial acumen. So that ability to really kind of tell a story, manage stakeholders, work across all areas of the business and have that next level of insights piece as well, which is a really hard skill to teach and to have. I think a lot of clients always come to me with the same problem of, oh, look, Liv, we want somebody who can do the technical skills, but we do really need them to be able to talk to both technical and non-technical people and talk with the business. So I think that hybrid across the two is always what
a skill that's sought after.
Exactly. Definitely.
So either you have that mix of technical and commercial, or you also have, or you are like someone who loves engineering and love the open source tools, maybe DBT and other data warehousing and engineering tools, right? So, 1 second. What was it next? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the industries that attract a lot of this kind of roles. Which industries do you feel like in Australia, especially, hire a lot for like data and technical roles? Tech companies, I'm guessing, or retail or banking. Where do you see a lot of demand?
No, good question. So I think naturally companies that need and use a lot of data are always going to be hiring a lot of data professionals. So if you think of your big, say, your Woolworths group, which has huge loyalty program, such high volume transactional data, they're going to be one of the biggest hirers for data roles, which is still the case. Similar with your Qantas, who again huge loyalty programs, and you've got your big tech companies like your Atlassians, etc. Like I say, I've noticed from a modern kind of tech perspective, there's a lot of almost startup and scaleups coming through, which are really cool and interesting to work with. But
some examples of startups and scale-ups, for example.
Just for the audience, a few shout outs too. About marketing. So you've got your kind of safety culture, if you're familiar with those guys that are doing really well. You've got Montu, which is kind of a medical cannabis company, so they're really
cannabis,
cool.
Yes, I remember it.
Obviously very different and very niche, but really doing awesome, and they've grown really well. So you've got an array of different startups across retail, FMCG, fintech, that are doing great. I'd say the only area that we don't as a business really focus a lot in is the bigger kind of banks and larger financial companies. Obviously they still have such a big appetite for data roles for sure, but because we only focus in data, they sometimes just tend to opt for more generalist recruiters. But anything across retail, FMCG, telco, aviation, those kind of companies will hire.
Right. I mean, any company that has a lot of data themselves, lots of transactions.
Yep.
We've heard a lot from you about how different data roles get prioritized, but do you feel like a lot of them have, for a lot of the data roles that you've mentioned, is academics really important, or it's okay if you have some certificates and you maybe have some projects that you can demonstrate that you've worked on? Is it very important that you have the right degree title on your resume?
Yeah, that's always a interesting one. It's kind of, experience versus academic qualifications. What do clients prefer? What do companies prefer? What's best to have? I'd say the obvious answer is, it's not going to hurt to have those kind of qualifications and to come from that background. If you've got a maths or a stats degree, then obviously that's going to stand you in good stead. I'm sure, you have instilled really good principles and have that foundation there for sure. But I think definitely with the Australian market, what a lot of companies value is the practical experience, so the commercial experience. Whether that's from doing internships or voluntary work with certain companies, I do feel like there are a few, like say, big players, as we've mentioned, particularly if you're in, like marketing analytics, campaign analytics, where that loyalty kind of experience is really valuable. Then obviously there's certain key players within that I think would really beat, somebody that hadn't got that but has got a maths degree, for example. So I think, it's a difficult one to answer because obviously having those kind of academic qualifications will help, but I think definitely that kind of practical experience, and even if you're going down the route of your own public kind of Tableau gallery or your own GitHub profiles, or something that you can show that's like real life and real world examples, I think they would definitely stand you in good stead, just versus somebody that's just got a mathematics degree.
That's a fair point. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're hiring someone, you want them to be a bit familiar with what you're going to do. And sometimes that's not necessarily what you did during your degree. It's not solving math problems or solving stats problems. It's helpful to have them for problem solving in general, but maybe it will be very different for you when you start debugging issues on your Looker, on your BigQuery and all that stuff. So having exposure to those platforms and having experience, that's definitely stands out when you're trying to hire for someone. Do you so do you feel like networking in that sense, other than having that experience, you feel like networking is really important? And what would you say to someone in their early career about networking and how do they get themselves out there? Is it really important? Or if you're an introvert and you don't really want to network, is that okay as well?
Good question. And I think that's probably one of the key differences I've also noticed from recruiting in the same space overseas in the UK to here is it is quite relationship driven over here. So a lot of our placements are through growing our network organically. So through people, knowing other good people and through recommendations. Just having that somebody that can vouch for you. So that's why I think what you touched on about just networking and getting yourself out there and having those connections is definitely invaluable. And again, it's not going to harm you to have those connections in place, versus not having them. I think it's still quite a small, community driven pond here in Australia, again, about people knowing good people. So I think if you can put yourself in those positions to network, and we're not saying you've got to be somebody that goes in and works the room and you're the loudest and the biggest in the room, absolutely not. But I think just keeping up to date with, okay, so what events are happening, what meetups can you go to, who can you connect with, who can you follow on LinkedIn, just doing research and being quite proactive in your approach. So if you notice that there's certain companies that are always hiring, or there's companies that you want to work for, connect with people in that space that work there, chat to people that work there, other people that they may be more junior to you, or, same level of experience as you, but get a better understanding of the kind of work that they're doing as well, just so that, if you do find yourself in that position where you're chatting with them, you're just more prepared and more aware of what's going on. So I think, the value of networking is super important. And I think also going down that mentorship route as well, if possible, which I suppose is another way of forming connections and building connections. If you can really try and identify somebody in that space to act as a bit of a mentor, whether it's within your own organization internally, or outside, that's maybe worked at certain companies or had certain experience that you're interested in. If you can have somebody to almost guide you and offer that support, I think that's really invaluable as well. Even if it's as simple as, you've got a job offer, but you're not sure, you're on the fence, having somebody there to talk it through with that's got similar experience or has maybe been there, I think is also super, super valuable.
Yeah. I've seen that. I think having sponsors for yourself in the organization you're working with is very important, especially when we're thinking about maybe trying something new or growing yourself in the organization, taking on something new, or wanting to take on like a manager role, or how do you grow towards that? In order to make that move, you really need someone vouching for you and helping you, support, give some good words for you when people are considering within the organization how to maybe fill a more senior role or something like that. So sponsors, mentors, they're very, very key in your career, I think. We go stepping back a little bit to something very basic. When you probably have scanned so many resumes, thousands of them. What do you look for when you scan a resume? The key things, especially in data. What do you look for?
Yeah, it's a good one, and that's one I'm asked quite a lot of the time, from candidates. Any tips and pointers? I think there's a fine line between obviously wanting to ensure you've got enough experience on the resume, but making sure that it's relevant. So, in my own personal opinion, a resume shouldn't be much more than 2 pages long. I think if you can try and make it concise, but ensure that it's relevant and geared towards that particular role. I'm definitely not a big advocate of changing your resume, but if you see a role that you've got certain experience in from a project before that maybe you've not gone into as much detail on as you'd like, then definitely ensuring that that's in there and just making sure you're happy that it does align to the JD as much as possible in terms of your experience. Obviously, be honest with the experience you've got, but just making sure that it's tailored. I'd say just make sure it reads well. There's so many times when we open a resume and it's so scary because there's information overload, or the formatting is too much. I think sometimes simple works, and it's better. But I think just making sure you've got that nice blend of your academic background, something that makes it a bit personal to you as well, whether it's just a line or two about who you are as a person, the kind of roles that you're seeking, what drives you, what makes you passionate, something so you can remember who that's associated with, and then also the technical experience and your work experience, and making sure that's quite clear and succinct, and you've got your kind of technical skills listed as well.
Nice. So keep it clear and as relevant to the role as possible.
For sure.
We're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about something that's going to be a bit more relevant to our audience as well. We've talked about data in general, but from your experience, have you worked with a lot of candidates who are more temporary residents, or maybe are international students? And have you noticed any difficulty or difference when working with candidates that maybe don't have permanent residency yet, or citizenship here yet in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that's quite personal to me, obviously coming from overseas myself. I first came over on a working holiday visa, but now I'm sponsored by Talent Insights, and can hopefully apply for my permanent residency next March. So I'm very familiar with the difficulties, or the limitations, or even sometimes misconceptions a lot of the time that can come with coming from overseas and being an immigrant. Even just on a personal level, when you're trying to break into, you know, different social groups as an adult, and you're almost kind of starting your life again. So I'm always trying to work with, you know, those that are in the same boat as I've been in and still in technically. So yeah, I think my number one recommendation for those that are on maybe a visa that does carry limitations, so whether it's, you know, the part-time visas, or you just need out and out sponsorship, is to look at contracts, like contracting within data, because not only is that really good experience to have anyway, because a lot of the time you're getting your foot through the door and you're getting that, you know, commercial experience here in Australia that is going to stand you in good stead on your resume. But it obviously would cater to that, you know, the limitations that you may have as well. So we place a lot of people that may be on visas on like 6 to 12 month engagements, so like day rate contracts or fixed term contracts.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be to be open to that kind of work as well, and to kind of be proactive in searching for that kind of work. I think if it's like sponsorship you're seeking, we always try and point candidates in the direction of your, you know, bigger like consultancies. They're just more obvious companies and industries that seem to offer sponsorship maybe a little bit more than others.
Bigger consultancies like the big fours?
Correct. Yeah. So your Deloitte, etc. I think they have some really good kind of programs, or yes, they have the right to sponsor in the first place, which is obviously great. But yeah, just in terms of obviously size, and as well, you may notice just more opportunities come through. So it'd be to work and be open to those kind of companies.
That's interesting, because I've heard from a lot of my friends that it's actually harder at bigger companies for them to sponsor you, and maybe like the startups are more open to sponsoring you because they need the talent more. I mean, and I've heard that at bigger companies, even though you've worked there for some time, they have a lot of options to work with different talents, so they're less willing to sponsor, but I'm not too sure. I mean, this is something that I'm also hearing from people as well. I'm not knowing directly, but some of the bigger companies also, for grad roles, I know, tend to hire PR citizenship holders for grad programs, especially. But it goes. Honestly, it could also depend on what role. It could be whether you're getting into auditing or getting into data or something like that.
For sure.
So there's variations, and these are all just things that I'm hearing. I'm not, you know, so I don't really know the real things that are happening in the industry. But maybe some things that you're looking at is maybe the big fours do hire and sponsor for certain types of roles.
I think because there's been a bit of a shift in terms of also what kind of companies are attractive to candidates to work at. So I think even with the startups and scale-ups, when you're saying, oh, well, they need people, but I think particularly in the area that I'm recruiting in, and that, you know, data engineering, analytics engineering, data analytics space, a lot of the time now they are the companies that candidates are wanting to work for anyway. So they almost have a bit more of a pick of the market than maybe what they would used to, because they're the ones, like say, doing the more sexier work, and they're the big advocates of trialing and testing new technologies. So naturally candidates are quite keen on them versus the more traditional companies that have been out there. I'd also say there's been a bit of a shift, obviously, just with the economy over the past couple of years as well, and where we've been at, in terms of, you like say, redundancies and fewer roles out there, then, you know, companies are probably going to be more geared towards hiring those that already have, you know, the work rights in place because they can. However, as that goes back to where we were, you know, a couple of years ago, where we lost a lot of overseas talent to COVID, etc., I think it will come back around where they do need to hire and look at those people. So I think it will just change. Like I say, there'll always be peaks and troughs in terms of what's important, but if you can target companies that you know do have that right to, and you know have set up, and whether they're open to that now or not, you know, at some point they will be, if they've got that in place already. So
that's a good point. There are definitely some difficulties with candidates that don't have a permanent residency yet. Do you see that there could be some bias that companies have when it comes to hiring international students or temporary residents, or it's more just like a financial or administrative kind of barrier?
Yeah, I'd say it's more just the initial, like, say, financial, if there's an upfront cost, even if they've got that ability to, sponsor, if you're carrying on and taking over someone else's sponsorship, there's naturally a bit of paperwork involved in that, right? So if you're comparing that against somebody that doesn't need that, then especially if it comes down to, okay, well, they're both the same level of experience and, which way we're going to go, naturally that would probably be their choice. But I don't think there's any unconscious bias, post that. So as in, if you've got that ability to, the interview process and everything like that is the same. I think it's more just the common misconception or idea of if you've, come from overseas or, you're kind of straight out of uni, are they going to have as much experience in terms of, in the Australian market and working for Australian companies? But if you can try and combat that and almost be a little bit kind of proactive before you get to that point, so whether that is by the internships or the voluntary work or getting that sponsor from somebody that's already in there and making those connections, and if you can really try and combat that before you get those kind of object pushbacks, then I think that would stand you in good stead as well. So I think, just not letting it be this whole idea of if that's going to be a restraint. Particularly, we place people on, the postgrad study visas, which are valid for like 2 to 4 years, and then by that point, once somebody starts in those jobs anyway, then you can quite likely put in, your own PR application down the line. So we're always placing candidates on those kind of visas. So I think, as long as you're ticking all the other boxes and being quite proactive in your approach and not just relying on a job falling into your lap that will provide you sponsorship, I think that will stand you in good stead.
Yeah, so helping people know that, you know the culture, you're used to the way of working here, you've had some of that exposure and experience.
Yeah.
And people are more likely to feel like, this person can really, maybe they can fit in and they can work in an Australian company. So those things are really important as well.
Definitely.
And on that note, do you see any bias in terms of like girls and guys going for data roles? Do people feel like, maybe like they look for a certain profile? Does that still happen, or do you feel like it doesn't really matter as long as you have the right experience? Do you see that kind of difference at all when people are comparing two profiles? Maybe more junior, and maybe there's some difference between guys and girls when they get considered for a technical role.
Yeah, good question. The whole kind of put on, gender bias. And I mean, I'm a woman in tech, so I'm a big advocate for, females in tech, females in data, for sure. And it's an obvious stat that, there are much fewer women in data when compared to men when it comes to roles. However, we are huge advocates of, encouraging, no bias at all. There's even certain like job description kind of screening websites and systems that you can use to try and ensure that the job descriptions that we're posting aren't biased more towards one particular gender over another, just so we can really maximize the kind of talent that we're attracting. So I'm a huge advocate of that. And we have had conversations with clients where they might say, okay, well, we would really like this kind of profile, just because that's not what we've got, at the minute. But I think it always boils down to, at the end, even if they start off by thinking that, once you get the people in the process and you're having those kind of chats and interviews, it always comes down to the right person for the job anyway. And that's one thing that we try and push and encourage. It's like, it should be about the person who's got the right skills, who's going to be the right culture fit, and that's what you should hire for sure. And that does happen a lot of the time. Yeah, definitely. So I think avoiding any kind of gender bias is super important.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I actually feel like Australia is pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Like, we're very more progressive than most countries. For sure. Wanting to make that more of a flatter playing field for not just gender but also in general.
Yep.
So there's definitely work towards that.
Yep.
Do you feel like there are certain companies that are more likely to hire temporary residents or international students? Have you noticed certain companies are more open to that? Or
I think, as mentioned, like you say, the consultancy seem to be quite open to that experience. I think because of the nature of what they do, where they're working with multiple clients at any one time and there's different projects, I think a lot of the time for them it's a positive as well. If you've, come from overseas, it shows, that adaptability, it shows a lot of persistence, and it also, means that a lot of the time you might have been exposed to clients who are global or international. So therefore that is actually really valuable experience. It's a plus. Definitely. And that's the route that we go down. Like say if I'm speaking to anyone that's worked overseas, you're exposed to different areas of the business, you're used to managing those different time zones, different it is tough being an expat, being an immigrant, I know that. So it's it's not for everybody. So I think that does form a certain kind of character as well. But I think, like say, the consultancies, because of the nature of what they do, where it is quite fast paced as well. They really regard that international experience quite highly.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that tip. Maybe we should all look into those companies a bit more for opportunities. Let me see. This could be a very hard question to ask you, but do you see any pay difference for internationals when they get hired, or not really?
I would say no, not. I think, and I would be very upset if that was the case. If it would fall, negatively, for sure. I think, it's just that initial barrier, if you like, or that initial stage of well, can they look at somebody on a temporary visa that may not have the full working rights? And then if it is a yes, then I don't see any kind of bias throughout the interview process, throughout the negotiation stage or anything like that. Even when it comes to like working with agency, that's a separate budget. It doesn't affect anything, candidates' expectations and what they should be entitled to or why they're targeting. So I don't see any difference in terms of, salary. It's more just that initial, can we look at that kind of candidate? And then it's about years of experience. It's about attitude. It's about technical skills. And it's not kind of biased towards your work rights.
And for, on that topic, do you see like certain roles in data has like a higher salary in general, or do engineers earn more in general, or more analytics roles earn more? I'm really curious in general in the market. What kind of roles have like a higher range?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say data engineering is pretty competitive. So generally, a lot of the time as well, analysts may transition into engineering. So I'd say, just to give an example, if you're hiring for like a mid-level data insights analyst, most of our companies are paying anywhere between kind of 130 to 150 base, give or take. Obviously, some companies offer really good like benefits, like bonus packages, etc. But you're looking around there. Whereas for a mid-level engineer, I'd say you're looking anywhere from kind of 145 to 160. So I'd say data engineering roles, they tend to pay slightly more than out and out analytics. Again, depends. There might be some certain requirements or certain niche roles that require extensive skills, and therefore that would bump it up. Or if it's obviously offers some people leadership or management, then that would obviously bump it up as well. But I'd say data engineering tends to pay pretty well on both contract day rate and salary.
That's really good insight. For AI, do you hire like AI roles a lot, like ML engineers, like machine learning engineers? Does that come through your desk often, or that's not something that you guys work with?
No, absolutely. So one of our consultants, Emily, has been actually growing out our kind of AI and ML capabilities and readiness for when that takes off. I think so far it's definitely been a lot of a buzzword for a lot of companies, in a sense of they know they're wanting to invest into AI, but they're just not sure how. And there's a lot of hesitancy, and they're waiting to see what other companies are doing before they kind of go down that route. And what we've noticed so far is even those companies that are hiring for, AI engineers, a lot of the time they're just putting that in the title. So it's still very much a data engineering or a data science role, but they're trying to attract the right talent because they're still in they're kind of infant stages of what that could look like themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a tricky one.
Hybrid. It's still doing some of the core work.
For sure.
Exploring a bit of the AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're going to come across candidates that have worked on some really cool AI projects that, would then, be more likely to get those kind of roles. But I think where we're at the minute, they're still falling into a lot of the existing kind of categories, whether it is more data engineering, more machine learning engineers, or more, data science roles.
Yeah.
So it's still in its infancy, but something as a business that we're growing out and we're kind of on top of and having those kind of conversations.
That's interesting.
Because there seems to be a lot of appetite. It's just what will happen and what they're going to do with it. So it'd be interesting to see where we are in 12 months from now, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. That's really good to know. And I'm guessing because they're putting out this kind of different title, they're probably looking for more special skills as well and maybe pay a bit more than a data engineering role.
Yeah.
So if you've worked on similar projects, it could put you in a really good position.
100%, yeah. And a lot of the time, even with that kind of work, some of these AI roles, it's all about kind of LLMs, like large language models, and geospatial kind of work. So if you've worked in those kind of companies, and again, that would lend itself quite nicely to those kind of roles. So that's what we're noticing in the minute.
That's cool. So let me take a break a bit. I think I'm done with all the temporary equations. Cool. Okay. So I think we've talked a lot about the career side of things and all the things that are happening now. I think I really want to get the end of our conversation to be about the future. So what kind of trends do you see in the next few years that will attract a lot of, or will need a lot of new talent? What do you, especially with AI, we've touched on it briefly, but how do you see that influencing the recruiting process? How do you see that influencing the data roles that are out there?
Yeah, great question. I think with AI, there's going to be, some small observations and some small things that candidates can do and start to do now to almost be prepared for that and be ahead of the curve, if you like. So the most obvious one being part of the application process. There's a lot of these AI screening ATS systems, which are screening in or out resumes, just dependent on keywords, for example. So again, that's kind of touching back on the point about with your CV, just ensuring that it is geared towards the job description as much as possible. Obviously, as an agency, we're very much on the human side of that, so we don't have any of that in place because that is our job, to ensure that we're doing it properly and thoroughly. But for companies that are going to be already using AI systems to kind of do that initial screening, just making sure that you're kind of ahead of that and prepared for that by making sure your CV does have those keywords in, it's clear, it's concise, it's easily digestible, it's in a good format, so you're not going to get rejected before they've even had the chance, before a human has had the chance to have a look at you. So I think that's a small and pretty easy thing to do and implement. I'd say also basic things like with your own personal branding, so like with your LinkedIn profile, is making sure that that's up to date, making sure that that is again easily readable and nice and easy on the eye, if you like, because again we have a lot of candidates come through where their resume looks great and then we're trying to find them on LinkedIn, or maybe the dates don't align, or it is the titles are all different, and straight away that kind of adds a bit of a layer of uncertainty. So I just think making sure that your personal branding is good and up and running can also help with the whole AI if companies are looking at that and screening that in or out. What else would I say? I think
you guys don't use AI in your recruiting process, right? It just is to screen resumes.
To screen. We're reading them. Obviously because that's an area that we only focus in. Naturally, we have a good idea of the kind of experience and the kind of candidates they want. And like I say, a lot of the people that we place are from our organic network anyway. So it's people knowing, but people, obviously we place people and we put job advertisements out there. And I think that's still important to do for sure. But a lot of the time it is about knowing your network and kind of going straight to that. So if I take a job briefing, it's, already knowing who I should call, because that's my job, to be in touch with the market. But yeah, in terms of, like, say, companies putting job ads out there, I think, that they will be using AI. Yeah.
Just screen resumes. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, especially, I guess, if have a lot of applications, maybe, especially for companies that have hundreds of thousands of applications that come in, it's impossible for them to look through all of them.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. So they've got to use some way in order to screen out, some profiles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe in some cases, even it helps them to find candidates faster, or maybe they're using AI even in the search process.
Definitely.
Do you guys use AI sometimes to find people if you need to find someone, or, like you said, it's very people-based?
It is people-based, but there is always an appetite and will be a need to headhunt, particularly with, like, say, certain niche roles or at a certain level. So I actually went to a AI-based LinkedIn event a couple of weeks ago, which was obviously led by LinkedIn, and they were showing some of the features that they're going to be implementing and rolling out in 2025, which is really cool. So anything from making content that is tailored to your network. So there's a tab that essentially is going to enable you to make content real time that's going to be relevant based on people that you chat to and people that you have in your network. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, also from a pure recruitment and headhunting perspective, we have all our kind of searches saved up, and now LinkedIn is just letting AI kind of do our job, in a sense of, we have the candidates come through every morning that have fallen back into that search, or it's like, oh, we recommend you speak to XYZ about this role. So it's still very much in the trial and testing phase, and it's got mixed feedback, amongst the team. But I think the key takeaway from it for me was, yes, it's AI, but you also have to train it. You have to educate it. So you've got to constantly be tweaking it and letting it know, no, that's not the right profile. Okay, why? So that human element is still needed and will still be needed. But I think it's saying that it can get there, and, like I say, it can allow for quicker, smarter recruitment, and the same on the candidate side as well. So
we can tailor our resumes faster.
Exactly.
The roles. I've seen a lot of tools where you can put your resume in and you can put the job description in.
Yeah, and
you can kind of tailor your resume to that to that job description. You can also search for jobs faster. Maybe some tools help you do that. So yeah, it's growing, and it will probably influence some of the process, both on the hiring and the applying side.
Definitely.
All right. So in general, I think that we've touched on a lot of interesting topics today, from what the market is looking like, how to break into the market, into the data market especially, and how to break into it as a temporary resident or an international student. A lot of what you've shared, I think, will help our audience so much in getting that first step in, or building themselves towards landing their first role, or being able to transition from a different career. I think it's been amazing to hear from you the real insights on the ground. Is there something that you want to share with us at the end of this podcast? Any last thoughts that you want to share about the market, about data, or about the experience of applying as an immigrant here in Australia? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think just really hitting home the point of, putting yourself out there, and it being so, like, say, relationship driven and community driven over here. And I think, like, say, whether it's going to Meetup, so there's meetup.com or Eventbrite that you can regularly keep track of what's going on. Just chatting to people, connecting with people. Like, say, you're having a browse on LinkedIn, looking at, they release the top 20 startups, and following them. If you go on LinkedIn and follow them, then you'll get their updates of what's happening. So just really trying to stay relevant. I think with tech, it's constantly evolving. There's always a new kind of product or update being released. So, trying to stay as up to date as possible, but also not overthinking it too much. And, doing what motivates you and what you're passionate about, because then I think naturally that'll lend itself to you, just doing better anyway, and that becomes more kind of organic, rather than trying to pigeonhole yourself into an area that maybe it doesn't motivate you as much, or just kind of following what you enjoy doing. I think there'll always be a demand and a need for, say, good tech people. Companies will always want to hire, the best. But just kind of putting yourself out there, immersing yourself in that space and what you're passionate about. And obviously we're a data recruitment company, so we're always open to any chats, any advice, whether it is just about what the market is saying, helping with resumes, and just keeping your ears to the ground. That's our job. So definitely reach out to any of the team at Talent Insights as well. Throw that out there.
I think that there are a lot of international students who maybe struggle even just to fit in and kind of get themselves set up to be relevant and have those networks. So it's really encouraging that you're saying that that's actually really important. And it's a big element to getting hired. So get yourself out there to events, meet people, talk to people, chat with them. I think from my experience, everyone has been very open. To me, talking or reaching out to them. Have been really friendly, even really senior people. I think if you have the right message, people will respond to you, because people love the feeling of being able to give back. Don't be shy and definitely reach out to people, right? I think I had one maybe last fun question for you. If not a recruiter, then what would you be doing?
That's a great question. Well, I don't actually know. No, I always wanted to be a dancer when I was growing up, but then ballerina. It's more like hip hop dancing. But then I dislocated my knee 3 times, so I kind of said goodbye to that dream. So now I just do it on the dance floor on a night out, or just socially. But I can't really imagine doing anything other than recruitment now, which is crazy considering I didn't know anything about it when I first fell into it. But I just love, like I say, being in that data space. It's a real people's person job. So I think that's definitely me.
It sounds like it's a perfect job for you. Whatever we do, it's that passion that shines through, and I really see that. Like, you really love and really know your space. So I think that's really amazing, and that's what you look for, I think, in when you're trying to look for roles as well. I guess in another world it could be a dancer.
Could be a dancer.
Who stops you from being a dancer along with being a recruiter?
In my head, I'm a part-time dancer and full-time recruiter.
We should definitely see some of those dancing videos. Thank you so much, Olivia, for today. I think it's been a really amazing session, and I think our audience will love this.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of diaXpora. Today, the key takeaways for us are: number 1, Australia is a very relationship and trust-based market. So networking and finding mentorship is really important and key to your career. Second of all, data and analytics engineering skills and open source technologies are sought after skills and are highly paid for skills as well. And third of all, startups and scale-ups are actually great places for you to build up these technical skills. If you want to follow Olivia, her LinkedIn is linked in the description below. Please also follow us on Instagram and also on Spotify. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like this video, and share it to anyone you think it could be helpful for. Follow along with us on our journey to build a thriving diaspora in Australia. See you next time.